We see a bit of a settling down when it comes to the yen, as it seems like the markets are expecting policy continuity to be the name of the game, regardless of who his successor is. Is continuity enough at this point? Because Abenomics was bold, but it's only kind of been partially successful, right? Does his successor really need to be more bold?
Well, there's certainly an argument for even bolder efforts at the structural reform that Prime Minister Abe initiated when he took the office in his second stint as Prime Minister under the term Abenomics. And seeing his successor dedicate him or herself to pursuing that policy with even greater vigor would certainly be encouraging. But I have to say, right now we're in the middle of this pandemic, and the economic impact of that has been substantial in Japan, even though the situation here in terms of the healthcare is better than in a lot of other developed economies. So I think a lot of folks are going to focus on continuity with an eye toward the fight being, at least for the near term, to defeat the pandemic and to get the economy on a stronger footing.
Of course, the US-Japan relationship really stands out, particularly as we see the US on a much more negative footing with other countries, the likes of China. For example, do you expect whoever leads Japan next will continue to push that relationship? And what I guess is the legacy and the work still left to be done when it comes to trade, given that Prime Minister Abe, I should say, walks away with at least the TPP as a success?
Well, I would expect any of Abe's successors to sustain the very strong momentum that the U.S.-Japan alliance has achieved under Mr. Abe's leadership. There's no question that Mr. Abe, who brought to the office some very strong convictions about Japanese foreign policy, was able really to revive Japanese policy in significant ways. And the keystone to that was making the U.S.-Japan alliance even stronger, which he's certainly done. And I would expect his successor, any of the ones who've indicated an interest at this point, to maintain that effort. Beyond that, Mr. Abe can be credited really with having brought Japan into TPP. When he took office in 2012, it wasn't at all clear which way Japan was going to go on this. And he managed to win over the agricultural constituencies here and others to push forward with the TPP agenda. And even after the U.S. withdrew, he was the one who led the effort among the remaining parties to forge the current TPP arrangement. So he gets a lot of credit for that. His successor, we will just have to see who it is. It looks like the Chief Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Suga, has the lead at the moment by a significant margin. And I assume if it's him, since he's been the number two in Mr. Abe's government for most of the last 6 years, I can expect that under Mr. Suga, we would see both the U.S.-Japan alliance and Japan's activist international trade policy continue.
Will Japan-U.S. relations be on a firmer footing if we have a Democrat in the White House? Because you said it, the U.S. withdrew from the TPP, then Japan came under auto tariff threats from the U.S., from the Trump administration more specifically, not to mention that the U.S. has asked to quadruple what it pays to support U.S. troops in Japan. So yes, they had a pretty strong relationship, but still Japan faced risks with this administration.
Well, I think if you look back at history, you'll see that whether it was a Democrat or a Republican in office, that U.S.-Japan relations have been one of the keystones of U.S. policy in the Asia-Pacific region. And whoever wins, I really don't expect that to change. Now, there's no question that that Mr. Trump had a very aggressive view about what needed to be done vis-a-vis Japan in terms of getting Japan to pay more, whether it's on trade or on defense. And I would certainly expect the second Trump administration to see those issues come to the fore with a little more salience, particularly perhaps now that Mr. Abe is gone and that special relationship that Trump and Abe had managed to form would be a thing of the past. So that's certainly something we would need to be watching out for in the future. If Joe Biden were to win, he, I think, has laid out perhaps a somewhat different perspective on where the U.S. would go with friends and allies and on global trade issues. And we'll just have to wait and see what the election produces. The Japanese, I think, are prepared to roll with it either way. And hopefully, whichever way it goes, we're going to have a stronger trading system out here in the Asia Pacific going forward.
Chris, just quickly, give me your take on Japan as not only a business hub, but a financial hub. We're now hearing from Japan's financial regulator that they want their staff to brush up on their English skills in order to be able to attract more financial companies, say, from the likes of Hong Kong. Is this a possibility for Tokyo? I mean, how much of the red tape has Prime Minister Abe cut, and what more do you want to see?
Well, Mr. Abe deserves a lot of credit, probably more than he's getting right this moment, as people look back at history, for all the things that he did to push forward structural reform. Many of those things are still yet to be fully accomplished, but he really gave them a tremendous head start and momentum here, and we can only hope his successor is going to continue to push those actively. For our business members here in Japan, we definitely want to see phase 2 of the U.S.-Japan trade negotiations move forward with some speed and energy, whoever wins in the U.S. in November and whoever is prime minister.